This is a case study about clients of mine, a couple whose money management story is one that I would love to go back and rewrite. The good news is that all isn't lost for them just yet. Joe and Sarah started working with me when they were in their late 20s. They were young, just married, and had no children at the time. They had well-paying corporate jobs in Dubai. A few years down the line, Joe got a job offer to move to another emirate in the UAE. The couple decided to make the move. They had a better career prospects over there, and one of the biggest benefits was that Joe's company were going to cover their housing bill. They were being given a great place to live on the company's campus. Convenient, cost-effective, better jobs, win-win all around. This move also meant that their finances eased up enough that they felt comfortable starting a family. Joe and Sarah went on to have 3 kids. This was a family with a little over $150,000 of annual household income. Some of the major expenses, house rent, school fees, for example, were covered by their companies. You'd think they had a great baseline to be able to build financial security, safety nets, saving plans, and more. And yet, today, over 15 years down the line, Joe and Sarah barely ever have $10,000 set aside to take advantages of investment opportunities. So what went wrong? I'll explain. How not to manage your money as a corporate executive. I'm going to do this slightly differently than my usual case studies. I'm going to share Joe and Sarah's story with you, but wrapped up in anti-tips. Anti-tip number 1, don't live beyond your means. Joe and Sarah lived extravagantly. Over time, they were outspending their earnings. They accumulated lifestyle debt. They took lavish holidays. They drove 2 fairly expensive cars while living on campus, barely a kilometer from the office for Joe. When I say lavish holidays, I mean a $30,000 splurge on a 30-day summer vacation in an exotic location. When as a household income, they made a cumulative $150,000 a year, can you see how that math doesn't add up? That holiday drained them of 1/5 of their income to cover 8% of the year. These extravagant expenses meant that Joe and Sarah didn't have much left over for the important things in life. Anti-tip number 2, don't lose sight of the important stuff, like education, and life insurance, and long-term savings. Because Joe and Sarah shelled out big bucks for experiences and on non-critical lifestyle experiences, they were often short when they needed a pot of money for the big things in life. When their son was about 4 years away from university, they decided to switch him into a bigger, more expensive school, one that they could not essentially afford. But the fees weren't out of reach because their incomes didn't allow for this outflow. The fees were out of reach because such a large part of their income was going towards frivolous lifestyle expenses. Anti-tip number 3, don't bring your advisor in only to clean up your financial messes. Joe and Sarah had me to turn to as their financial advisor since their late 20s, and yet they would only often loop me into their financial ongoings after they've had gone and made an investment and lost all the money, or after they had splurged and accumulated another big chunk of debt. And by that point, there's not much your financial advisor can do. I could maybe advise them on the best way forward. I could tell them to cut their losses and move on, but I can't bring back lost money. Joe and Sarah did this often. They'd meet friends for drinks and hear about some new high-yielding investment portfolio that gave their friends some big returns. They would decide essentially on the spur of the moment that this was a great option for them too. They'd go ahead and they'd make this investment only to lose everything, the entire sum that they invested, all because they didn't understand the investment structure entirely, all without knowing that their appetite for risk was not the same as their friends. And as their financial advisor, I would only hear about this something that happened last month. I assure you, even the best of financial advisors cannot turn back time to clean up a poorly made financial move on a client spot. Anti-tip number 4, don't rely on the paycheck. So far, Joe and Sarah haven't been in that dire, not uncommon situation where one of them has lost their jobs. But should that happen, should one of them choose to pursue a different career path or give entrepreneurship a shot, they'd be in a financial mess. Joe and Sarah are so dependent on that paycheck coming in. They're so accustomed to 30-day messes that can be cleaned up when their salary hits their bank account that they are not prepared for a rainy day. It doesn't matter how secure you feel or know you are in your career. Plan for the best and prepare for the worst. Get those savings in place. Get your priorities right. Get critical illness cover. Insure your life. Anti-tip number 4. Don't think the future is far away. Joe and Sarah have goals and plans for the future. They don't plan on retiring in the UAE. They could go back to India, where they're from, and where retired life would be a lot more affordable than the UAE anyway. but they want to go to retire in Portugal. Retiring in Portugal is a retired life in euros. They would essentially need 3 times their savings efforts in order to afford that. For a couple who struggled consistently for 15 years to save, and retirement getting closer, this is going to be a hard goal to hit. The mistake here is one that so many of us are guilty of. We think we've got time. Some of this might sound extremely basic to you, but that's just it. Smart, capable people like Joe and Sarah forget the basics. Their base level mistakes cost them heavily in the long and short term. And as a result, Joe and Sarah will probably never really get to retire and enjoy that retired life that they're dreaming of. Don't get me wrong, I'm sharing Joe and Sarah's case here, but they're not unique in their challenges. Most mid to high income corporate executive households are guilty of these actions and oversights too. Most people live so large and so far beyond their means today, telling themselves that life is too short to live small. Life is too short not to take that holiday or splurge on that Michelin star restaurant or drive the car of your dreams. It's romantic to live like there's no tomorrow. But my question to you is, what if there is a tomorrow? Is it looking good the way things are going right now?